The night my brother announced his engagement, I paid for the dinner, not because anyone asked me to. I just knew. The way I always knew. He'd called me the week before. Voice doing that thing where it gets soft right before he needs something, and said he was planning something special for Courtney. Could I help cover the reservation? Just this once. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. That was 4 years ago. And honestly, looking back, that dinner was the beginning of everything. My name is Hazel. I'm 31 years old. I have a one-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, a job I actually love doing, financial compliance work for a mid-sized logistics company, and a savings account I have rebuilt twice from almost nothing. I have a cat named Fig. I make my own coffee every morning and I eat lunch at my desk. And I take walks after work when the weather is decent. My life is quiet and it is mine. But for 4 years, it mostly wasn't. I need to back up. My brother Miles is 35. He's always been the one people root for. Growing up, he had this energy that made rooms tilt toward him. Teachers liked him. Neighbors liked him. Our parents, and I say this without bitterness because I've done the work to get past it, liked him in a way that was different from how they liked me. Not more, maybe, just louder. More visible. When Miles did something good, our mom called her sisters. When I did something good, she said, "That's great, honey," and asked if I wanted more pasta. I don't think she meant anything by it. I really don't. But that's the house I grew up in. Miles got married 3 years ago. I was a bridesmaid. I wore a dress the color of old mustard, and I smiled in every photo, and I gave a toast that made people laugh and cry in the right places. And I paid for the bridal party's hair and makeup because Courtney's family was going through some things, and my brother texted me 2 days before and said it would mean the world. $460. I remember the exact number because I wrote it down. I don't know why I wrote it down. Some part of me knew, even then. The financial help didn't start all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you about being the responsible one in a family. It happens in layers. First, it's a one-time thing. Then it's just until they get back on their feet. Then getting back on their feet keeps taking longer. And you've already said yes so many times that saying no starts to feel like a personality change. Like you'd be becoming someone different, someone cold. And you're not cold. You're just tired. But you don't know yet that you're allowed to be tired. Miles lost his job about 6 months after the wedding. Sales position at a tech startup. The company folded, which was real and genuinely not his fault. I sent him $800 to cover 2 months of their car payment. One-time thing. He was grateful. He texted a lot of heart emojis. Then Courtney's contract work dried up. Then they had a water heater emergency. Then Miles found a new job. But it paid less, and they'd gotten behind on their mortgage, and could I just help bridge the gap? Just for a month, just so they didn't fall further behind. Just once. The just once thing lasted 3 years and 4 months. I want to be accurate about the money because I think it matters. It's easy to tell this kind of story in vague terms. I gave so much, they took so much, and leave it emotional and imprecise. But the truth is, I kept records. Not at first. At first, I trusted that it was temporary, and records felt paranoid. But about a year in, I started writing things down. In total, between the wedding expenses and the regular monthly transfers and the emergencies, I gave my brother and his wife somewhere around $42,000 over 3.5 years. I was making $68,000 a year. I drove a 9-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard. I didn't take a vacation for 2 years. I bought my winter coat at a consignment shop. Not because I couldn't afford a new one, I could have, but because I was always doing the math, always calculating what I could spare, always thinking that next month they'd be stable, and I'd stop. And then they weren't, and I didn't. And here's the thing that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. The help had become invisible. That's the only word for it. I had become a utility in my brother's life. Not a person, a utility. Like electricity or Wi-Fi. You don't think about the electricity until it goes out. You don't thank it for being there. Miles never said thank you. Not never. He said it at first effusively, with those heart emojis. But somewhere in year 2, it stopped. The transfers just became part of the landscape. Sometimes he'd call to tell me he needed money in the same tone he'd used to tell me about a TV show he was watching. Casual. Unremarkable. Expected. and Courtney. We never had a bad relationship, exactly. But there was always something in the way she looked at me, a kind of assessment, like she was calculating what I was worth to them. She called me the sensible one once at a family dinner, and everyone laughed, and I laughed too, and I didn't understand until later that it wasn't entirely a compliment. The sensible one doesn't get glamorous. The sensible one gets depended on. Their friends didn't know. I'm pretty sure of that. Miles and Courtney threw dinner parties. They took a trip to Savannah for their anniversary. They bought a new couch. I know about the couch because my mom mentioned it. Miles and Courtney got the most beautiful sectional, and I was standing in my apartment on a Tuesday night eating cereal for dinner because I'd transferred rent assistance 2 days earlier and my grocery budget was thin. I didn't say anything. I put my cereal bowl in the sink and looked out the window at the parking lot and thought about nothing for a long time. The thing that finally moved something in me wasn't dramatic. I wish it had been, honestly. I wish it had been, honestly. I quarto twe of could tell you there was a confrontation or a revelation, but it was a Sunday afternoon. I was doing laundry and I got a text from Miles that said simply, "Hey, need to talk to you about November. Can you do 1,200 this month instead of the usual?" The usual. I read that word about 6 times. The usual. At some point, and I can't tell you exactly when, my help had gone from a gift to a line item. From something I chose to something that was expected. He had budgeted me in. I was in the budget as a recurring expense. I sat on the edge of my bed with my laundry half folded and I thought, when did this happen? When did I become the usual? I texted back, "Let me think about it," which I'd never said before. I'd always just said yes. He called 20 minutes later. I let it ring. I didn't cut them off that day. I want to be honest about that. I sat with it for another 6 weeks. I talked to my therapist who asked me some questions that I didn't like, the kind that make you see things you'd been carefully not seeing. She didn't tell me what to do. She just kept asking, "What would you lose if you stopped?" And when I kept answering, "I'd feel guilty," she asked, "Is guilt the same as love?" And I didn't have a good answer for that. I drafted a text to Miles 3 times and deleted it. I thought about how my parents would react. My mom in particular. She'd always been a little proud, I think, of the way the family held together, the way we helped each other, and I knew some of that pride was actually about me, the daughter who helped without being asked, the sensible one. I almost talked myself out of it, twice. But then came the wedding anniversary party. Miles and Courtney planned a big dinner to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. A restaurant, private dining room, about 25 people. I assumed, without being told, that I was probably covering some portion of it. I was right. Miles texted me the week before and said the deposit was $1,600 and he was short. Could I get him on this one? I said yes. Because I always said yes. Because by then, yes was a reflex, not a choice. I drove 40 minutes to the restaurant in a dress I'd owned since 2019. I sat at a long table full of their friends, most of whom I'd met once or twice. Courtney looked beautiful. Miles gave a speech. He talked about their journey together, the hard times and the good times, how they'd learned that a strong marriage takes work and support and showing up for each other. He thanked his parents. He thanked his in-laws. He thanked 3 friends by name. He did not mention me. I sat very still. Someone to my left was laughing at something. The candles were those tall ivory ones in silver holders. My water glass was very cold. I counted the candles. There were 9. After the speech, people drifted into smaller conversations, and someone came and refilled the wine, and the energy loosened. I was talking to a woman across from me. Courtney's coworker, friendly, asked what I did for work. And then Courtney drifted over and joined us, and the coworker said something to her about what a beautiful family she'd married into, and Courtney smiled and said yes. Miles has great parents. The coworker turned to me and said, "Are you Miles's sister?" And I said yes. And Courtney said, and she said it lightly, the way you say something offhand, the way you'd comment on the weather. She said, "Hazel's never really had her own life to worry about, so she's always been very available to us." The coworker laughed a little, uncertain. The kind of laugh you give when you're not sure if it's a joke. I didn't laugh. I looked at Courtney. She was already turning to flag down a server. Never really had her own life. available to us. Sat in a restaurant I had partially paid for, at a party I had partially paid for, with a couch in their living room I had partially paid for. And the thing is, I don't think she even knew what she'd said. I don't think she thought about it for 1 second. It wasn't cruelty with intention. It was something almost worse. I had become so expected, so incorporated into the infrastructure of their life, that she said it without thinking. Because to her, it was just true. Hazel has no life. Hazel is available. That's just how things are. I excused myself and went to the bathroom and stood over the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, the way you do when you need to slow something down inside you. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I thought about the 9 candles on the table. I thought about the couch. I thought about the word usual. I thought about a winter coat from a consignment shop. I thought about the question my therapist asked, is guilt the same as love? No. I decided right there in a restaurant bathroom with ivory wallpaper and a candle that smelled like vanilla. No, they are not the same thing. I went back to the table. I finished my dinner. I talked to people. I smiled when it was appropriate to smile. On the outside, I was completely fine. On the inside, something had settled into a quiet, permanent decision. I gave myself 2 weeks to make sure I wasn't just reacting. That's something I've learned about myself. I make better choices when I let them breathe. I wrote out, in a notebook, everything I had given and everything I had not received. Not to be transactional, not because love is a ledger, but because I needed to see it on paper, to make it real, to give myself permission to trust what I already knew. When I looked at the page, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger. I thought I'd feel anger. What I felt was grief. Grief for all the years I'd spent shrinking my own life down to fit inside the space they needed me to occupy. Grief for the trips I didn't take and the savings I rebuilt from nothing and the Tuesday evenings I spent doing math instead of living. Grief for the version of myself that kept waiting for someone to notice and say thank you. Nobody was going to say thank you. That was the truth I'd been circling for 3 years. And I could keep circling it, or I could land. I landed. I didn't do it dramatically. That felt important to me. No speech, no scene, no big declaration. I called Miles on a Wednesday evening, which was intentional, ordinary night, ordinary hour, no occasion attached to it. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, what's up? I said. I'm calling because I need to tell you something and I want to say it directly. I'm not going to be sending money anymore. Not this month, not going forward. I love you and I hope things get easier. But I can't keep doing this. Silence. Then what? I said. I've been helping for almost 4 years, and I think you probably knew it wasn't sustainable. I'm not doing this with anger. I'm just done. He said, Hazel, we depend on that. You can't just, I said, I know you depend on it. That's actually part of the problem. More silence. He said, Mom's going to be really upset about this. I said, maybe, but this is between you and me, not Mom. He said, you're being selfish. I sat with that for a second. A year ago, that word would have broken me. Selfish, the worst thing the sensible one can be. The sensible one is not supposed to have a self to be-ish about. I said, I don't think I am. I think I've been the opposite of selfish for a long time, and it cost me a lot, and I'm changing that. I hope you figure it out. I really do. And I hung up. My hands were shaking a little. Not from fear, from something that felt, honestly, like the first clean breath I'd taken in years. Miles called back twice that night. I didn't answer. He texted, we need to talk about this properly. I texted back. I said what I needed to say. I'm not changing my mind. My mom called the next morning. I had expected this. She wasn't yelling. She never yells. But her voice had that particular tightness that means she's trying to stay calm while being very not calm. She said, Miles told me what happened. I think you're being a little extreme, Hazel. I said, I've been sending him money for almost 4 years, Mom. That's not extreme. Stopping is just normal. She said, he's family. You do things for family. I said, I know. And I did for 4 years. There has to be a point where it stops. She said, he and Courtney are struggling. I said, I know they are. I hope they find a way through it. But I'm not the way through it. I can't be. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I've thought about a lot since. She said, "I always thought you were proud of being the dependable one." I said, "I think I was for a long time, but there's a difference between dependable and taken for granted. And somewhere along the way, we crossed that line." She didn't have an answer for that. She said she needed to go. She said she hoped I'd reconsider. I said I loved her and I wouldn't. The weeks after were strange. Not peaceful, not right away. More like the silence after a loud noise, where you're still adjusting to the quiet and you can't tell yet if it's relief or just the absence of something. Miles did not reach out again for almost 3 weeks. When he finally texted, it was brief. "Hope you're okay." I texted back, "I am, thank you. I hope you are too." Courtney never reached out. I hadn't expected her to. What I hadn't expected was my own parents. Not the phone call that I prepared for, but the 2 weeks of near silence after, the careful, somewhat formal texts, the way my mom started talking to me a little like I was someone she was still deciding about. That part was harder than anything Miles said or did, because I love my parents, because I know they love me, because loving each other and seeing each other clearly are 2 different things, and sometimes the gap between them is where all the grief lives. I kept going to therapy. I kept taking my evening walks. I bought a winter coat, a good one, the kind with real insulation, from an actual store in November when they go on sale. I put $600 into my emergency fund the first month. I didn't transfer anything to Miles. Then again the next month. Then again, I booked a trip to Portugal for the following spring, solo. 7 days, a little apartment with a blue-tiled kitchen, long walks in Lisbon, pastéis de nata every morning. I've been thinking about Portugal for 3 years, this specific trip, every time I needed something to look forward to and couldn't find anything that felt real. I booked it on a Tuesday night, sitting at my kitchen table, and when the confirmation came through, I held my phone and felt something so simple and so enormous that I didn't have a name for it. Just mine. The feeling was just mine. My relationship with my family is different now. Not broken. I don't think it's broken. But different in the way that things are different when you finally start telling the truth. My mom and I talk every week or so. We don't discuss Miles's finances. We talk about other things, normal things, and there's an understanding between us that some things have shifted and we're both learning to stand in the new arrangement. I think she respects me more than she used to, actually. I think seeing me hold a line changed something in how she sees me. I can't be sure. But that's what it feels like. Miles found a better job last fall. I heard it through my mom. I texted him congratulations. He said thanks. We're in the polite, cautious place that maybe becomes something better eventually, or maybe doesn't. I don't know. I hold that uncertainty without trying to fix it. What I know is this. There is a version of me that is still in that restaurant bathroom, running cold water over her wrists, deciding. And there is the version of me on a Tuesday morning in Lisbon, sitting at a blue-tiled kitchen table with a coffee and a small sugar-dusted pastry, watching light come through the window, not doing anyone else's math. I chose the second one. And if you are somewhere in the middle of that, if you are in the bathroom deciding, I want you to know that the guilt and the love are real and they don't cancel each other out. And you don't have to stop loving someone to stop disappearing for them. You just have to decide that your life is also a life. Mine is. Finally, mine is. I've thought a lot about what actually made me change. Not the dinner, not Courtney's comment, not even the word usual in that text. What made me change was the slow accumulation of my own silence. Every time I didn't say anything, every time I transferred the money without being asked properly, without a real conversation, without anyone treating it like the significant thing it was. I trained them. That's the honest part. I trained Miles and Courtney to expect me, and I trained myself to be available. And nobody in that dynamic was the villain so much as we were all just doing what had quietly been established as normal. That's the thing about these situations that people on the outside don't understand. They want there to be a monster. They want the brother to be purely cruel, the wife to be deliberately calculating, and sometimes people like that exist. But in my case, it was subtler, and in some ways harder to untangle. Because Miles wasn't a bad person. He was a person who had been handed a very comfortable arrangement and had stopped questioning it. Most people would do the same. The failure was not in his character. The failure was in the system we built together, the one where I kept saying yes, and he kept asking, and neither of us ever stopped to examine what we were doing. What changed me was deciding to be intelligent about my own life. Not cold, not selfish, intelligent. There is a version of generosity that is wise, that gives from abundance and chooses freely and maintains itself. And there is a version that gives from fear. Fear of being the difficult one. Fear of being seen as withholding. Fear of the silence that follows when you stop making yourself useful. I had been doing the second kind for years and calling it love. Real love, I think, requires that you remain a whole person. You can't genuinely love someone from a place of total depletion. You can perform it. I performed it beautifully for 4 years. But Hazel, the actual Hazel, the one who wanted to go to Portugal and buy a real coat and eat cereal without doing sad math, she was getting smaller every month. And a smaller version of me was not more generous. She was just more gone. When I finally said I'm done, the thing I felt wasn't triumph. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect the revenge story to feel victorious. What I felt was something closer to sorrow and relief at the same time, pressed together so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. Sorrow for the years. Relief that there wouldn't be more of them. The actions we repeat become the life we live. That's not a curse, it's just how things work. Miles and Courtney repeated the pattern of taking without reckoning, and eventually that pattern cost them the one person who had been holding their floor up. I repeated the pattern of giving without limits, and eventually that pattern cost me years I will not get back. Neither of us escaped the consequences of what we kept choosing. We never do. But consequences go both ways. I also chose eventually to stop, and that choice compounded too, into a code. Into a savings account rebuilt, into a blue-tiled kitchen in Lisbon on a quiet morning that belonged entirely to me. Every good thing I have now is the result of one decision I kept making, that my life was worth protecting. If you're somewhere in the middle of a story like this, that's the only thing I'd want you to take with you. Not a strategy, not a script. Just this, your life is worth protecting. Not someday. Now.